Chapter 11 Rifts and Chains Part 3
"Hurry! You must close the tear before more come through,"
the robed figure shouted, wasting no time on introductions. He strode forward hastily, skirting the glowing crack that groaned and widened before them, and ushered the two brothers before it, and as he did, a tightening sensation emanated from within Grex's armor and Astegon's orb, and it became painful as they stood over the waxing portal.
"You must reach out with the weave! Do it now! We haven't a moment to waste!"
Just as the cloaked man said these words, shadowy silhouettes began emerging from beneath the glowing purple membrane that covered the rift. Astegon acted first, channeling the energy of his orb, linking immediately to whatever arcane force emanated from the portal. It was like a sudden connection was formed, but not strong enough to maintain.
"Grex!"
Astegon shouted, feeling the energy from his orb waning. Grex moved in and with his first step felt a jolt of arcing pain lance into his armor. The runic inlay inside began pulsing, and he too felt a connection form. The two brothers, with their combined power, managed to feel the chaotic torrent of arcane energy submit to their will. With sheer exertion, the two began mending the rift, and just as new shadowy claws attempted to tear through the barrier, the chasm had been sealed. The robed figure was now smiling as he dropped his hood, exposing bright red hair cut into a mohawk, with several thin beaded braids swaying past his shoulders. A tattoo of a leafless tree was imprinted upon his face, which was clearly smiling then, but most strikingly were his pointed ears, clearly denoting his elven heritage.
"I'm glad to see my theory was correct."
He turned to Colin.
"And even more so that my advice was heeded."
"And you are?" Astegon inquired, slightly puzzled. Colin stepped forward to introduce the figure behind them.
"This is Thelos, the one-trick pony that Vivian had mentioned. He arrived shortly after the Cataclysm and kept the lingering energy of the breach from killing you while you slept, during which time he insisted you two were the only way to close the tears, and it seems he was right."
"Well, let's just hope they can pull this off on the big one," another voice chimed in. It was the halfling this time, cleaning his blades on an ichor-stained strip of fabric he seemed to have just torn from the hem of his cloak.
"My name's Dredge. I'm a wanderer, master chef, and on occasion a flurry of knives." "All right, this is Astegon and Grex, the keys to our salvation. Now we should get going up the mountain now. The forward camp is just up this ladder."
Colin gestured at the wrought iron ladder bolted to the stony surface of the cliff face. They all knew Colin was right. There would be no more time for names, no more room for relief. The mountain groaned beneath them, a deep, distant sound like a wounded beast shifting in its sleep. Smoke drifted down slope from higher battles, carrying the smell of scorched flesh and wet iron. Every second they lingered was another second something clawed its way closer to the world. Colin moved first, already turning toward the cliff face.
"Up, now!"
The wrought iron ladder was bolted directly into the stone, its rungs bent and scarred, blackened in places where heat or acid had kissed them. It climbed straight up the cliff wall, disappearing into smoke and torchlight above. From below, faint voices could be heard, shouted orders, cries of pain, the hollow murmur of men clinging to life. Thelos went first without hesitation, staff slung across his back as he climbed with practiced speed. Dredge followed, testing each rung before trusting it, nimble despite exhaustion, vanishing upward like a shadow slipping into a crack. Astegon paused only a moment, looking back toward the sealed rift, toward the place where the world had nearly torn itself open again. Before ascending, the blue light of his eyes dimmed, his movements slower, heavier. Grex waited. Colin lingered beside him, one hand resting on the stone as if steadying himself as much as preparing to climb. For a moment, neither of them spoke, Below, the battlefield was quieter now, but not peaceful. Never peaceful. Colin glanced up the ladder, then back at Grex. He gave a single nod, not command, acknowledgement.
"You did good down there,"
he said simply. Then he climbed. Grex was left alone at the base of the ladder. He looked around. What passed for the forward camp's lower edge was barely holding together. Broken barricades leaned at odd angles. Tattered banners hung limp against stone. Blood had soaked into the ground so deeply it had turned the dust black and tacky beneath his feet. A stretcher lay abandoned nearby, snapped clean in half, dark stains trailing from where it had been dragged away. This place was not a camp. It was a wound. Grex turned and climbed. Each rung groaned under his weight, iron creaking as slime reinforced metal from within. The climb was slow, deliberate. With every pull upward, more of the camp came into view. Tents clustered along narrow shelves carved into the mountain, canvas patched and repatched, some barely standing. Fires burned low in shallow pits, their light flickering weakly against the stone. Soldiers lay everywhere, some propped against rocks with bandaged stumps where limps had been, others stretched flat and unmoving beneath thin cloaks. Healers moved among them with bloodied hands and hollow eyes, doing what they could with what little remained. Pain filled the air, not screaming. Most were past that, but low groans, whispered prayers, ragged breathing. The cost of every step upward was written plainly here. When Grex hauled himself over the lip of the cliff, the full weight of it settled over him. Immediately, the entire party pulls around the fire in the center of camp, the brothers looking and taking in their surroundings as Colin marches off to check on the injured. Leaving the halfling and elf to their wishes, Grex and Astegon stay silent, not knowing what to say or what to speak about. They could have kept moving. A part of them thought they should without waiting. But out of the silence,
"Fascinating,"
Thelos said at last, unable to keep the wonder from his voice.
"Truly fascinating."
Astegon opened one eye.
"We are not curios. That's the thing,"
Thelos replied quickly, smiling despite himself.
"You are, and you're also people."
He leaned forward, elbows on his knees.
"Do you have any idea how rare it is to encounter a construct that knows itself, that reasons, that chooses?"
Grex remained still, but the firelight reflected faintly off his helm as he turned his head a fraction toward the elf.
"Who made you?"
Thelos asked softly.
"Your creator. I would give nearly anything to meet them."
The air around the fire cooled. Astegon's eye dimmed. Grex's hands tightened, metal creaking faintly.
"Our master,"
Astegon said after a pause, his voice even but hollow,
"is dead."
Velos's smile vanished at once.
"Ah."
He straightened, expression sobering.
"Then my apologies. I didn't mean to—"
"That," Grex rumbled, "is why we are here."
A moment passed in silence, broken only by the fire and the distant sounds of the camp. Groans, murmurs, the clink of armor being removed from bodies that would not need it again. Dredge cleared his throat loudly and shifted on his crate.
"Speaking of still being alive."
He winced as he moved, one hand pressing against his ribs.
"Anyone got something for stab-adjacent discomfort?"
Astegon stood without comment and crossed the camp. From within his form, he produced a small vial, its contents glowing faintly. He held it out to the halfling.
"Drink,"
he said. Dredge blinked.
"Just like that?"
"Yes." The halfling uncorked it and downed the potion in one go, shuddering as warmth spread through him. Color returned to his face almost instantly. He exhaled sharply.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's—"
"You owe me,"
Astegon said calmly. Dredge froze. "I will collect," Astegon continued, eyes narrowing slightly, "when it is least convenient for you." A grin slowly spread across Dredge's face.
"I knew I liked you."
Thelos shook his head, chuckling despite himself, then gestured up the mountain. "This camp, Vivian and Colin set it here intentionally, close enough to stage an ascent, far enough that the main rift's instability doesn't tear it apart outright." His expression darkened. "The temple at the summit is the source, the primary breach. Everything else is just bleeding off it." Grex turned toward him.
"You dampened the magic affecting us."
"Yes."
"Then why not the rift?"
Thelos exhaled through his nose. "Because the weave is wrong. Ever since the first tear opened, it hasn't behaved like magic is supposed to. It doesn't flow, it spasms, twists. What I did for you wasn't control, it was luck. Pure, unrepeatable luck." "You guessed," Astegon tilted his head. "I theorized," Thelos corrected gently, "and hoped. I dampened the resonance around your cores, insulated you from the worst of the feedback. But sealing a rift?" He shook his head. "That's not something I can reach. The weave there isn't responding to reason anymore." Raised voices cut through the camp. "I will not authorize further advance." Vivian strode into the firelight, jaw tight with restrained fury. At her side walked Lord Chancellor Fedric, robes pristine compared to the blood-soaked camp around him, his expression sharp with authority and fear in equal measure. "You're asking broken soldiers to throw themselves at an anomaly," Fedric snapped. "This force needs to retreat." "And abandon the mountain?" Vivian shot back. "Abandon the rift?" Fedric's gaze fell on Grex and Astegon. His lip curled. "Those things are not an answer. They're liabilities, prisoners at best." Grex stood. The firelight bent around his shadow as he rose to his full height, silent and unmoving. Fedric's voice faltered just slightly. Vivian turned on him. "Choose your words carefully." "They are tools," Fedric insisted, "and dangerous ones. If they pose a threat—" Colin stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Fedric and the brothers. "That's enough." "You forget your place," Fedric hissed.
"No,"
Colin replied coldly.
"you have."
He gestured around the camp, at the wounded, the amputees, the exhausted healers.
"You're a pencil pusher who climbed too high and started believing authority was the same thing as leadership. And these people are alive because they fought, not because you signed papers."
Fedric flushed. "I order you to—"
"You don't order executions," Colin cut in, "and you don't order me."
He glanced back at Grex and Astegon.
"They're our best shot, the only one that's actually worked."
Fedric sputtered, voice rising as he was ignored.
"There are still survivors above us," Colin said calmly. "Pilgrim's Passage is dangerous, but it is faster."
Vivian nodded. "The mineshaft is safer, but the last party I sent hasn't returned." "Then speed outweighs certainty," Astegon replied. The blue slime stepping forward with clear insight and strong intent. "We will close the rifts, and if there are lives to save on the way, we will save them." Fedric shouted something incoherent. Grex and Astegon walked past him. Both struck him with the shoulder as they passed, not enough to injure, but enough to remind him of his size. Fedric staggered, robes rustling indignantly. Grex paused just long enough to look down at him.
"Do not worry," Grex said. "Your tools are off to do the job for you."
Then they turned toward Pilgrim's Passage, and the mountain loomed above them, waiting. Chapter 12. Controlled Chaos. The party climbed Pilgrim's Passage toward the ruined temple, Astegon and Colin leading the way while Grex sludged behind. The elf and the halfling lingered at his side, and neither of them fared much better than the walking green slime. Dredge muttered under his breath, and Velas tried to hum a tune meant to lift spirits. Grex had no need for their company or the humming. He broke away and lumbered forward, falling in beside Astegon and Colin at the head of the group. Then it happened. A blood-curdling screams rang out, the sound of a dozen men crying out at once. Every member of the party froze for a heartbeat before charging ahead. As they rushed forward, they passed bodies strewn across the grass, blood staining the once green hillside and soaking into rotted wooden benches left behind by pilgrims long dead. Ahead stood a railing with twin staircases descending on either side. Below lay what should have been a peaceful resting place, a quiet landing beneath the holy site of the temple looming above. Instead, horror greeted them. Spears jutted skyward as soldiers fought desperately, and from a massive rippling rift in the air, demons poured forth. Crawlers skittered across the stone, ghastly, twisted shapes clawed their way into the world, and towering tree-like abominations heaved themselves free. They battered relentlessly against towering steel shields, the soldiers straining to hold the line, desperate to keep the horrors from breaking through and flooding back toward the camp. Grex didn't wait when he saw the tree demons. He couldn't hesitate. Trees were still a strange thing to him. Unlike Astegon, Grex hadn't spent much time outside, but in the short while he had known them, they had been vibrant, rich with colors of orange, red, and yellow, alive with birds nesting, calling, raising families in their branches. That image was gone now, forever tainted. The massive demons were wrapped in hardened, tree-like flesh, their bark split by jagged, irregular runes carved deep into their bodies. Claws capable of tearing stone scraped against steel as they moved. Their faces were little more than warped knots in the wood, crowned with horn-like branches twisting skyward. One of the monsters bellowed, a sound like splintering timber, as soldiers below screamed for aid. Grex didn't look to Astegon. He didn't look to anyone. He hurled himself over the railing. A smaller shadow followed close behind. Grex hit the ground hard and swung his hammer in the same motion, the blow crashing into the nearest tree demon. The impact nearly toppled the towering beast in a single strike, bark and ichor exploding outward, but the shadow that followed him made its presence known in a different way. Dredge surged forward with a feral war cry, twin daggers flashing as he weaved between the crawlers. He slashed and hacked through demon flesh, carving a bloody path through the horde. Dark ichor sprayed across his clothes, and the bodies left crumpled in his wake. Above them, the remaining three held the high ground. Colin raised his hand crossbow and leaned over the railing, taking aim between Grex and Dredge, where a mass of demons was beginning to spill from the rift. Astegon knew he would have to jump down soon, but the tree demons were the true threat. He hesitated, trusting his brother to finish them first. Colin didn't wait. Below, the soldiers guarding the stairs held their formation, driving spears again and again into the torsos of the advancing beasts, fighting desperately to keep the line from breaking. Colin fired. The bolt tore through the air and buried itself in a crawler's skull. The creature shrieked as its claws scraped inches from the boot of a stationed soldier before it collapsed in a twitching heap. Seeing the chaos below and trusting Colin's steady hand, Astegon felt an idea take shape. From his own mass, the blue slime drew matter together, shaping it into a long trident. The three prongs curved into cruel, hooked points. Without hesitation, he hurled it downward. The weapon punched clean through a ghastly demon's torso, lifting it from its feet and pinning it in place like meat on a rack. Then there was Velas. The elf turned toward the left staircase, where the press of demons crashed against the soldiers like a living tide. He planted his staff before him, both hands gripping the polished wood. Words in an ancient elven tongue slipped from his lips, barely louder than a whisper, Runes flared to life, and coils of electricity spiraled around his arcane focus. Just before Thelos spoke the spell's name, Astegon's orb flickered. A pulse of light sputtered within it, uneasy, strained. The weave spoke to Astegon as Thelos lifted his staff high.
"Witch bolt!"
The runes ignited at once, and lightning screamed forward, arcing past the soldiers. The spell caught and fractured through the untainted reflections of their armor, splitting and surging as it struck. With a thunderous boom, 3 ghastly demons and a handful of crawlers were blasted apart, their bodies bursting and burning into clouds of scorched dust. Something sparked within Astegon. He channeled the weave through his mass and into the tip of his scimitar. Runes ignited around the blade, similar to Thelos's, yet different. Where the elf's magic crackled and sputtered, Astegon's was clean, precise, readable, as though the symbols had been lifted straight from the pages of a perfectly inked spellbook. They spun in tight, deliberate rings around the weapon. Without another breath or another thought, Astegon released it. A massive, spiraling spike of ice erupted from the encircling runes and screamed downward. It struck a tree demon mid-swing, just as the creature raised its claws to crush the cornered dredge. The spike punched through its chest in a burst of frozen violence. Ice exploded outward, showering the ground below in razor-sharp shards as the demon staggered back, its roar breaking into a gurgling hiss. Dredge didn't flinch. The demons hissed and howled, but the halfling roared back. Grex moved in beside him, stepping closer and turning his back to the half-beaten tree demon without hesitation. Thunk! The monster's claws slammed into Grex's steel armor and splintered apart against his back. The green slime didn't even react. Around them, the soldiers found their footing again. From both staircases, they surged forward, driving spears into demon flesh, as Colin and his line pressed closer toward the rift, spreading gore across the stone. Another tree demon lunged toward Dredge. Grex raised his arm and blocked the strike, the blow crashing uselessly against his arms. That was a mistake. Dredge slid forward in an instant, low, fast, ducking not just beneath the demon's legs but Grex's as well. He came up behind the creature in one fluid motion, leaping onto its back. Both daggers plunged in, over and over, as he climbed the monster like a living wall, stabbing with desperate precision as though his life depended on it. Because it did. Astegon couldn't wait any longer. With a bubbling chuckle, the blue slime leapt free of his clothes and hurled himself down into the fray. His hide armor collapsed in on itself as he fell, landing in a heap atop his discarded form. Below, Astegon slammed into a crawler and engulfed it whole, his shifting mass wrapping tight around the demon. The creature thrashed for only a moment before it was crushed and dissolved within him. Then Astegon rose. His body flowed back upward through his fallen clothes, reforming as he reclaimed his armor and weapons, the last traces of the demon consumed and gone. When he straightened, he stood back to back with Grex once more. Together again. Around them, Thelos and Colin pressed forward with the soldiers, tightening their formation and choking the demonic presence near the rift. Grex swung his hammer with brutal force. Bark-like flesh exploded into splinters as chunks of the giant tree demon were torn free and scattered across the battlefield. Beside him, Dredge and Astegon focused on the remaining giant. Astegon drew his scimitar, and from his body he shaped another. An icy replica formed in his grasp, perfect and gleaming. He advanced like a practiced duelist. His real blade flashed first, a feint. Then he struck true with the frozen copy, slicing clean through the demon's heel. The tree demon roared and collapsed to one knee, its sudden drop nearly throwing Dredge from its back. Nearly. The halfling laughed, wild and breathless, before plunging both daggers down into the creature's skull again and again. The giant shuddered once, then fell still. One tree demon lay dead, one remained, but the rift did not seal. Smaller demons continued to spill from it in writhing pools, clawing their way into the world. The soldiers surged forward with raised spears, driving steel into screeching torsos. Each impact landed with a wet thud, every stumble answered by the sharp crack of breaking bone. Colin and Thelos pushed toward the rift, cutting a path through the chaos, helping the Slime Brothers advance as the tear in reality pulsed and swelled with every passing second. The runes etched into Grex's armor began to glow. Astegon's orb answered in kind, its light flaring as the rift blinked, hungry, unstable. The brothers locked eyes. They nodded once, then they charged. Grex smashed into the swarm like a cannonball hurled with impossible force, metal crashing through demon flesh as bodies were thrown aside. Astegon flowed beside him, slipping through the horde as though the demons were nothing more than stones in a rushing river, never slowing, never stopping. They reached the heart of the rift, armor and orb pressed together, their magic biting into the demonic arcane tear. The air screamed as the connection formed. The brothers roared in defiance as claws seized at them, demons wrenching and pulling, trying to tear them free.
"Stop them!"
Colin shouted. The soldiers answered at once, forming a wall of steel, while Dredge, still slick with demon blood, leapt forward, throwing himself into the press to stall the oncoming horde and keep the brothers standing. Grex's voice and the groan of metal twisted together as pain boiled through him. His armor creaked and strained, runes flaring wildly as though they might tear themselves free. Astegon's body hardened in response, his form locking in place, becoming almost impossible to move. But the scream that tore from him was raw and unrestrained. The pain was too much. He was already exhausted, the climb up the mountain, the weight of grief still clinging to him, and now this, forcing his fallible body beyond its limits. Cracks spread across his surface as though his very skin were fracturing under the strain. Grex saw it, the way Astegon was about to shatter. With a guttural roar, he dragged himself closer, pulling Astegon into him as the runes on both armor and orb pulsed one final time. There was a sudden whoosh, like the world exhaling, and the rift snapped shut. The demons caught halfway through it turned to ash mid-scream, their final screeches cut short as soldiers drove spears through the last of them. Silence followed. The brothers collapsed to their knees. One of Grex's arms hung heavily over Astegon's shoulder as the blue slime's hardened form softened, reverting to a more fluid state. He blubbed and glugged weakly while Grex heaved, his body pulsing and bubbling as he fought to steady himself. They stayed like that for a moment, breathing, trembling, alive. Dredge, Thelos, and Colin gathered near them as the soldiers began to rest, tending wounds and lowering their weapons at last. The battlefield stilled, smoke and ash drifting on the mountain air, and above them the summit awaited. The top of the mountain was finally within their grasp. Thelos was astounded by what he had witnessed. It proved beyond doubt that the brothers sealing a rift had not been a fluke the first time. He wanted to speak, to point, to explain, to spill knowledge like a man dying of thirst who had suddenly found rain, but his body refused him. He wasn't just tired. The mana within him was nearly gone. He had cast Witch Bolt again and again without pause, lighting demons like candles so the Slime Brothers could fight their way forward. Dredge didn't look much better. He was battered and scraped raw, having tumbled, rolled, and bitten stone more times than his blades had found demonic flesh. Still, he'd had his moments, or so he told himself. In the end, his role had been to distract, to harry, to make just enough noise that no killing blows landed on the injured and exhausted soldiers. And that had mattered. Colin moved among those soldiers now, tending wounds and steadying hands. He hadn't thrown himself into the thick of the demons, but his bolts had flown true all the same, each shot placed with care. The cording of his hand crossbow hung frayed and strained, nearly torn apart from the effort. They didn't need to speak it aloud. The brothers couldn't rest. The top of the mountain pulsed faintly, the demonic weave still stirring, still calling. The rift was not done with them, and there would be no more time to recover. Astegon placed a hand on Grex's shoulder and pushed himself upright. His knees wobbled, his form clinging to a fragile semblance of humanity, but Astegon knew it didn't matter. What mattered was forward. Colin, Thelos, and Dredge rose to join him. The blue slime stepped ahead of the wounded soldiers, straightening despite the strain, placing himself between them and whatever waited above. Grex loomed behind Astegon, silent and massive, a towering, menacing shadow. He said nothing, but to the soldiers watching them climb higher still, they saw something else entirely. They saw heroes. "Those too weak to move on, stay," Astegon said. "But those who can still wield a bow, who can provide cover for me and my party, I humbly ask that you follow us and aid where you can." His voice was calm, steady, and unshaking, but it carried. He spoke like a leader, breathing with intention, every word placed. "This is the final stretch," he continued, "and we cannot do it with just the 5 of us." He paused. "We need you." The words struck deep. A few soldiers pushed themselves to their feet, pain etched into their faces, bows shaking in their hands. Others tried and failed, collapsing back to their knees, weeping openly at being left behind. Astegon raised his hand once. That was all it took. The party turned and moved as one, the chosen soldiers falling in behind them as they pressed onward toward the summit. Chapter 13. No Time to Waste. One moment, and then they were there. Grex and Astegon stood at the edge of what remained of the temple, the place that had taken their master from them. Alwyn's body no longer rested where it once had. In its place pulsed a vast, nearly organic membrane stretched across the temple floor, swelling and contracting like a living thing. A rift, breathing. Fragments of the temple lay scattered in every direction. Scattered pillars, collapsed walls, slabs of cracked stone. They formed a broken, uneven path around the massive tear at the center, the only solid ground left intact. From within the membrane, tiny demons screeched themselves into existence, clawing and tearing through the weave as though ripping through wet flesh. "Halt," Colin whispered. The soldiers froze at once atop the cracked stone steps, bows lowering but never leaving their grips. Grex and Astegon stood at the front. Thelos and Dredge hovered just behind them, eyes fixed forward. "The captain is right," Thelos said quietly. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with awe and exhaustion. "That rift ahead, it's the source of all of this. If we seal it, truly seal it, we save the world." He swallowed. Only then did he really look at the floor. There was no safe ground, no stable path, only leaps, stone to stone, shattered brick to fallen wall, each one hovering above the churning demonic membrane below. One misstep would mean being swallowed whole. Thelos glanced down at his thin, shaking legs. He already knew the truth. He couldn't make that jump. "Colin," Astegon said, his voice steady despite the pull of the rift. "You and the soldiers will provide fire support. We don't risk stepping onto the weave itself. Best case, it behaves like stone. Worst case, we fall through, or it burns us alive from the inside out." As he spoke, Grex's grip tightened around his hammer. Metal groaned softly beneath his fingers, runes along his armor responding to the rift's pulse with an uneasy glow. The green slime's posture lowered, coiled and ready, like a siege engine, waiting for release. "Oi," Dredge muttered, rolling his shoulders as he drew his daggers, steel whispering free of their sheaths. "This is getting about as pleasant as a swarm of flies in a corpse pit. Let's just get in there and squash the damn gnats." He shifted his weight forward, restless energy crawling under his skin. Up ahead was the answer to everything, the end of the climb, the end of the waiting. His eyes flicked back to Colin, then to Thelos. He was already running the route in his head, already moving. "Look ahead," Astegon said. Grex lifted one massive arm and pointed. At the center of the ruined temple floor, just beyond a jagged, upright wall of fallen stone, something stirred. Curled in upon itself lay a hulking mass of gray flesh, vast and dense, its surface faintly slick, as though sweating from the heat of the rift. A horn jutted free, twisted and scarred. A thick tail lay coiled beneath it, twitching once. Leathery wings folded tight against its body, concealing most of its shape, but not its size. Sleeping, waiting. "That thing isn't going to let us seal the rift peacefully," Astegon continued, his tone measured but grim. "And with crawlers and infernal spawn already tearing free from the membrane," he paused, "it won't be alone." As if to answer him, the surface of the rift rippled nearby. Smaller demons clawed their way out, shrieking as they skidded across stone and began scrambling down the mountain paths, fleeing or hunting. Dredge rolled his eyes again, unimpressed. "Big ugly thing, lots of noise. Yeah, seen worse," Dredge said with eagerness. Thelos didn't argue. Instead, he nudged the halfling sharply with his elbow and tilted his head toward the fleeing demons spilling down the mountainside. His expression was pale, eyes wide, not with fear alone, but calculation. "We have to make sure both Astegon and Grex reach the rift," Thelos said. His jaw tightened as he spoke, eyes never leaving the pulsing membrane ahead. "Those crawlers will loop back. The halfling and I can hold them off. Colin and his men will provide cover, thin and smaller ones before they overwhelm us." He hesitated, then looked at the brothers. "But you two—" His voice faltered for just a moment, the weight of what he was asking settling in. "You have to break through." "Please," Astegon scoffed. His form stiffened, edges sharpening as his mass grew more solid, more defined. "Grex will topple that beast, and I'll reach the rift before Colin can put an arrow through a demon's skull." There was pride there, undeniable, burning, but beneath it ran something deeper. The weave pulsed, his orb pulsed in answer, each thrum reverberating through him like a second heartbeat. This was it, the place where questions stopped being distant thoughts and became something he could touch. Nothing was stopping him. Grex nodded once, then with a thunderous hoofed step, he charged. Stone cracked beneath his weight as he vaulted up the final stairs and leapt onto the first shattered platform, clearing the dark, pulsing blue webbing stretched across the floor. The membrane rippled beneath him as he passed over it, recoiling as though offended by his defiance. Astegon followed immediately. He surged forward, vaulting from platform to platform, his movement fluid and deliberate, like a calm river cutting through broken rock. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Each leap carried him farther into the heart of the ruin, as the mountain itself seemed to wake, the pulse beneath their feet growing stronger, faster. Behind them, the ground split open. The demon horde surged upward in screeching waves, clawing free of stone and membrane alike. Colin and his soldiers rushed in after Thelos and Dredge, boots skidding as they dropped to one knee in practiced unison. Crossbows snapped up, strings groaned under tension, bolts flew, steel sang, and as the demons screamed and charged, the brothers pressed on, toward the rift, toward the truth, toward whatever waited to stop them.
"Fire!"
Colin shouted. The mountain answered. A volley of arrows screamed overhead, bowstrings snapping in violent unison. Bolts streaked through the air, thudding into flesh and stone alike. The sound was relentless, wood cracking, steel biting, bodies collapsing. Beside him, Thelos planted his staff and began whispering in elven, the words spilling out fast and urgent. Runes of fire flared into existence around the arcane focus, glowing hot and bright before launching forward as streaking bolts of flame. A second volley joined the first. Fire and steel rained down the slope, and through it all the two slime brothers ran. Grex never slowed. His hooves shattered stone with every stride as he leapt from platform to platform, clearing the pulsing blue-black weave stretched like a living skin below. Arrows glanced off his blackened cape, fire splashing across it before guttering out against the stone. Demons clawed desperately at his boots, their hands snapping shut on empty air as his hammer slung low, brushing skulls, crushing bone, never breaking rhythm. Thwam! Astegon reacted instantly. From his body he cast an ice-forged net, the frozen lattice snapping open midair before slamming down atop a cluster of crawlers just as they reached for Grex's legs. Ice hardened around them in a heartbeat, pinning shrieking bodies to the stone as the membrane beneath rippled in frustration. Astegon twisted mid-run, his movement sharp yet elegant, and with a single controlled breath he leapt, clearing the final gap and landing beside a standing fragment of temple wall. He slid into cover, arrows and fire streaking past overhead as stone chipped and cracked around him. Then the demon moved. The massive shape at the center of the ruin stirred, flesh pulling tight as it unfurled itself from its curled slumber. Gray, leathery wings spread wide with a wet, scraping sound, scattering dust and debris as they snapped open. The creature rose and roared, its mouth a cavern of jagged fangs. Its head was wrong, too many angles, too many eyes, more spider than beast. Its torso was grotesquely humanoid, thick with corded muscle, while a massive spiked tail dragged behind it, carving gouges into the stone. Clawed hands scraped against the floor as it hauled itself upright, the sound sending a shiver through the ruin. Behind it, the rift lay fully exposed, a vast split membrane stretched across the temple floor, pulsing and breathing as demons screamed beneath its surface, trapped just below the skin of reality. The Guardian had awakened, and it stood between the brothers and the end of everything. "Grex!" Astegon shouted. That was all it took. The giant metal behemoth surged forward, armor shrieking as he clipped the corner of the brick wall and smashed straight through it. Stone exploded outward as if it had never mattered. Grex didn't slow, didn't look back, his hammer locked in all four hands as he lowered his weight and charged, because his brother had called his name, and that name lit something deep inside him. He had to be useful, he had to protect, he had to stop it. Grex thundered across the broken floor, hooves cracking stone, each step a quake. The demon loomed ahead, wings spreading, claws scraping, but Grex did not hesitate. He drew the hammer back, slime and metal screaming together.
Glug! Die!
Crash! Stone detonated where Grex's hammer fell. The platform beneath the demon's feet shattered. Whole slabs of stone hurled skyward before crashing back down into clusters of lesser demons, pulverizing them into splattered ruin. Dust and debris filled the air. Grex lifted his head, and the giant demon stared back down at him. All its eyes locked onto the green slime. He had missed. For a heartbeat, the battlefield held its breath. Then both monsters roared. Grex surged forward, swinging again. The demon met him head-on, claws crashing against the descending hammer. The impact rang like a cathedral bell as Grex knocked the creature's hands wide, forcing it back a step. But the demon did not fall. With a violent twist of its body, its massive tail whipped around and slammed into Grex's guard. The force carved trenches through stone as Grex skidded backward, hooves digging deep, armor screaming in protest. He didn't budge. He took it. The sight left the soldiers in the back lines frozen, mouths agape, watching a creature built like a siege engine stop a blow that should have crushed him outright. Meanwhile, Valos's breath caught in his throat. Astegon stood inside the rift's reach. The mage hadn't even seen him move that fast. The blue slime was already there, leather armor flung open, the orb at his core pulsing violently in time with the membrane beneath his feet. The weave flared around him like a living thing. Even Dredge, locked in a brutal grapple with the crawler, looked up. Slash! Blue streaked across the air. Before Grex could react, demonic blood poured down in thick, steaming sheets. A wing shuddered, split nearly in half, ichor splashing across stone in pints as the demon screamed in fury and pain. Astegon stood behind it. In one hand, a shattered ice hilt steamed and cracked apart. In the other, his scimitar dripped with blood. Grex let out a low chuckle. He turned slightly toward the halfling, never taking his attention off the towering demon, now reeling before him.
"I need to get past this monster," Grex said, steady and certain. "Dredge, create a diversion for me."
The demon shrieked and reared back, claws rising high, lining up a killing strike.
"Hear that, mage?"
Dredge shouted as he planted a boot into a crawler's face and sprang back to his feet. Thelos drew in a sharp breath and steadied himself. Then, despite the chaos, he smiled. Not wide, not warm, clever. His eyes flickered with sudden understanding.
"Oh," the elf murmured, "I see how we win."
He swung his staff in a tight arc. A revolving circle of flaming runes spun into existence before him, each sigil snapping into place like a cog in a greater machine.
"Dredge,"
Thelos called, voice sharp with intent,
"don't waste my cover."
He unleashed the spell. Bolts of flame erupted in rapid succession, streaking past Dredge's shoulders and detonating ahead of him. Crawler skulls burst apart in sprays of ash and embers, their screeches cut short mid-lunge. The path opened just long enough. Dredge moved. The halfling sprinted, leather boots whispering over stone as he leapt from one shattered platform to the next. Low, fast, every motion precise. Thelos kept the pressure on, timing each blast to deny the demons even a heartbeat to regroup. They were almost there. Then the battlefield betrayed them. Rubble, thrown aside earlier by Grex's hammer, shifted underfoot. Pebbles skittered where solid stone should have been. Dredge's boot slid just enough. His balance vanished. He slammed hard onto his back against the platform, breath tearing from his lungs as pain shot up his spine.
"Damn it, Dredge!"
Thelos shouted out in anger, his staff cracking with an arcane glow. Clink! The sound rang out, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. The brothers met the demon's strike together. Steel and ice slammed into claw as one, Astegon abandoning the rift without hesitation, sliding in beside Grex just in time. The impact rang through the platform, a thunderous clash that forced the massive creature back on its heels. They shoved. The demon staggered, talons scraping furrows through stone as it stumbled backward, fury twisting its many eyes wide. Then it reared its head and unleashed a harrowing howl, raw and piercing, that rippled through the mountain itself. The rift's membrane quivered in response. Grex exhaled, a single heavy breath, the kind taken only when you're still standing. Astegon didn't wait. He broke first, darting forward, and Grex followed, both brothers bolting to either side of the demon, splitting its attention. That was when the membrane behind it ruptured in bursts of motion. Crawlers tore free. Gray limbs and snapping maws spilled from the rift, hurling themselves at the brothers in a frenzy, claws scraping stone as they swarmed toward them.
Grr!
Grex swings his hammer with a great heave. Astegon, sliding under Grex's hammer, swings his blade like a hurricane. Hammer and blade met, and devastation was the gift splattering on the rift's membrane as the two jump into heart of the rift. Armor and orb pulsing the demonic weave. Astegon takes shelter in front of Grex as the green slime's back faced the giant demon.
"Everyone, we end this now. Aim for the big demon,"
Astegon demands as he and his brother pulsed the rift. The soldiers and the brothers' allies rose to their full attention. At Astegon's command, the soldiers raised their crossbows in unison, aiming just over the shattered wall of the ruined temple, straight at the towering skull of the giant demon as it lifted its hoof above Grex. Death loomed. It hovered there, vast and inevitable, as the green slime inside his metal coffin flexed with all his might, plates groaning under the strain. Behind them, Thelos and Dredge received their unspoken mission. The halfling sprang back to his feet, fire returning to his eyes as the glow of the rift danced across his daggers, their edges gleaming with promise.
"One more attempt,"
Dredge muttered, meant for himself, but his eyes flicked to Thelos all the same. The elf didn't hesitate. Thelos nodded, and with a smooth sweep of his staff, a single rune of flame bloomed into existence before him, hovering, waiting, hungry for the perfect moment.
"Let's get it,"
Thelos said calmly. The giant demon bellowed as its hoof came crashing down, the impact shaking the stone platform beneath them, cracking rock and rattling bone. Grex and Astegon locked eyes. They nodded once. The runes within them flared to life, pulsing in answer. Grex flexed all four arms and braced himself, refusing to break his brother's gaze, even as the shadow of the blow descended. Their mission was clear. Seal the rift, and they would be damned before they failed. The demon's hoof came down like a falling tower. It crashed into Grex's back, and metal screamed as his armor shattered inward, plates buckling and collapsing under impossible force. Cracks split the frame, and through them Grex's body spilled, green essence leaking out as though he were being crushed apart, as though this was the blow that would end him. But the gray behemoth did not fall. Grex stood, all four palms pressed into the underside of the giant demon's hoof, his form trembling but unbroken, the stone beneath him fracturing under the strain. The mountain groaned in protest. Astegon lowered his mask. He smiled, not in relief, but in certainty, as if he had never doubted his brother for even a heartbeat.
"Blub, ready now?"
"Glub, I was waiting for you." The brothers laughed, brief, breathless, unafraid. With a thunderous heave, Grex shoved upward and hurled the demon's hoof off himself. The massive creature staggered back, claws scraping stone as it fought to regain balance. Its hooves struck the ground hard enough to send shockwaves through the platform, and the rift answered. The membrane quaked, then it tore wider. Hordes upon hordes of crawlers and lesser demons poured out in writhing waves, screeching and clawing their way into the open, hungry for flesh and blood.
"Fire!"
Colin shouted. The soldiers loosed their volley. Bolts screamed through the air, hammering into the giant demon's wings, punching holes through leathery flesh and forcing the creature to halt as it stumbled, roaring in fury. The smaller demons surged forward. Colin stepped ahead of the line. One bolt remained. His jaw tightened. He drew in a single steady breath, then exhaled. The trigger clicked.
"Now!"
The cry tore from the brothers and Dredge as one. Colin's bolt struck true, burying itself deep into the giant demon's eye. The creature shrieked, a sound like splitting iron and tearing flesh, and staggered backward in blind fury. Its claws raked uselessly at the air as it fought to keep its footing, but that was only the beginning. The brothers pulsed. A titanic whoosh of arcane force detonated outward from the rift, the weave buckling and screaming as raw magic surged across the ruined temple. The shockwave slammed into the giant demon, hurling it further back, while the smaller demons caught in the blast were obliterated outright, screeching as their own corrupted magic rebounded through them, reducing bodies to drifting ash. The power did not discriminate. Grex and Astegon boiled. The demonic arcane energy seared through them, burning slime and metal alike. Their bodies warped and trembled as the rift answered their call with cruel resistance. This was too much. The weave was too strong. They knew it. Still, they had one chance left, one final pulse, With everything they had left, the brothers pushed again.
Boom!
A firebolt screamed across the battlefield and detonated against the giant demon's ankle. The blast shattered bone and balance alike. The towering creature crashed down onto the platform with an earth-splitting impact right in front of Dredge. Halfling and demon locked eyes. Only one of them was holding daggers, ready to spill blood. Dredge didn't hesitate. He leapt forward, driving both daggers down into the demon's skull again and again, steel biting deep as the creature thrashed and roared. And as its death spasms shook the stone, the rift answered one last time. Another pulse erupted outward. This one was final. Every demon still crawling across the mountain, on the platforms, down the slopes, clawing their way upward, was caught in the wave. They died screaming, bodies unraveling into dust and cinders, their existence erased in an instant. Silence followed. The brothers collapsed, metal caved in and goo spilled free as Grex and Astegon hit the ground in a broken heap. Blue slime and green pooled separately across the cracked stone, motionless, steaming, spent. Together, they were done. The membrane of the rift convulsed, shuddering as though in agony. Then slowly it began to close. Like a living wound stitching itself shut, stone dragged itself back into place, grinding against stone and banishing the last traces of demonic flesh. The arcane membrane peeled away and vanished, leaving behind a vast stabilized scar in the temple floor. A rift no longer bleeding, but never healed, a reminder carved into the mountain itself. Dredge collapsed to one knee, coughing smoke and blood, his chest heaving as he forced air back into scorched lungs. Through blurred vision, he looked toward Colin and Thelos. Behind them, the soldiers had already begun to cheer. Laughter, shouts, and exhausted cries of victory echoed across the mountaintop. The demons were gone. The nightmare was over. But Colin and Thelos did not join the celebration. Their eyes locked on Dredge, then drifted past him. There, pulled against the cracked stone, lay the brothers.
"Damn it, medic!"
Colin shouted, his voice cutting through the cheers like a blade. Thelos was already moving. He dropped to his knees beside the slimes, hands glowing as raw magic pulsed through his fingers. The brothers' forms quivered faintly, their colors dulling as consciousness slipped away from them. "They'll be all right," Thelos said, firm, almost defiant, as a smile spread across his face. Not relief, gratitude. "They have to be." Because every one of them knew the truth. Without the brothers, the rift would still be bleeding.